This is Soul of the South News.
Good evening and welcome to the SSN Evening News. I'm Vicki Newton. We begin tonight with developments from Ferguson, Missouri, where the police chief, Thomas Jackson, denies reports that he is stepping down from his post. Jackson became the face of that department after Darren Wilson, a white officer, killed 18-year-old Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager. Jackson was openly criticized as his officers arrested protesters and patrolled the streets wearing military gear. Jackson says the reports are not true and that no one in his chain of command has fired him or asked him to resign. And he says if he does resign, it will be his decision. Meanwhile, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder is sending a message to the person or persons leaking information about the Brown investigation. That message: stop talking. The Attorney General says the leaks are not productive.
This notion of leaking out selective information, which started as early as the release of that tape from the candy store, that wholesale
right, the convenience
store, and then these leaks about what's happened in the car. These are all the kinds of things that I think are inappropriate. I've said I'm exasperated. It's a nice way of saying I'm mad. Whoever the sources of the leaks are need to shut up.
When it comes to the Ferguson Police Department, Holder says, quote, wholesale change is appropriate. There is concern Ferguson will erupt if Wilson is not indicted. Some legal analysts say it appears authorities in the area are trying to prepare the community in the event there is not an indictment. Police Chief Tom Jackson has even indicated that the calls for his resignation may be an attempt to ease the tension, but efforts by Jackson to connect with residents not working, including an apology he issued weeks ago to Michael Brown's family.
I'm truly sorry for the loss of your son.
Ferguson Police Chief Tom Jackson came under fire within days of the shooting of unarmed teenager Michael Brown by one of Ferguson's police officers.
Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
As protesters claimed the headlines, authorities moved in more police and tanks, and the criticism mounted. You're here with your sign. What's the statement you want to make?
Flat out, what if it was your child? I mean, I grew up in Mississippi, and the history, not the story, the history of my parents, their lives, what they went through, it's just unbelievable that we're going through it now.
Instead of just letting them kill us and we just go about our business, we said enough is enough.
How can he change anything when he's got a Congress that's got?
You know what I've seen? I've seen Obama experiencing the same racism that we see.
The Justice Department initiated an investigation of the Ferguson Police Department, and Attorney General Eric Holder visited the area, meeting with Captain Ron Johnson of the Missouri Highway Patrol, the man placed in charge of security in Ferguson after the initial chaos.
I think we always have to evaluate the tools that we use in law enforcement, and I think the incidents that have happened here, that happen across our country, will make us make sure that we're looking at our tools and evaluating the tools that we have and evaluating the tools that our officers have each and every day to protect the citizens of our country and also to protect themselves.
Protests have now continued for almost 3 months, and an uneasy truce is holding. But most agree the situation could change dramatically and quickly, depending on the grand jury and its decision to file or not to file charges against Darren Wilson, the officer who fatally shot Michael Brown. Now, earlier this month, 18-year-old Von Derek Myers Jr. was shot to death by an off-duty member of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. Police say Myers had a gun and fired at the officer, but family members say he was holding a sandwich. And an autopsy shows Myers was shot 8 times, 6 of them in the back. The shooting has heightened the tensions in an area already on edge because of Michael Brown's death. St. Louis American reporter Bridget O'Neill has been following the developments in both shootings, and I spoke to her in an interview about the days since those shootings occurred. Bridget, you have covered the Michael Brown shooting and the subsequent protests for a while now. What is the mood among protesters at this point?
It's still a little, I think a tinderbox is the correct word that I would like to use personally because of the recent shooting that took place. So at first, I think the move was one of healing and trying to move forward and awaiting the prosecutor's decision regarding this case. But when Von Derek Myers was shot and killed, and his autopsy results were released, the mood again changed. So it's a little on edge. That's what I would like to say.
And Vandera was shot and killed by a St. Louis police officer, and the autopsy shows that he was shot 8 times, 6 of those from behind. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so how are protesters and demonstrators, if at all, able to separate these two shootings?
I think they're definitely, I can't speak for all of them, but I think that they're definitely similar situations of maybe racial profiling, incidents of racial profiling. And I think that's where they are similar. And that's why both situations are eliciting the same response from protesters. They're tired of the police response in certain situations. Now, the facts are different, but I definitely think that is that type of a situation.
In the midst of the Vandera shooting, there's also the impression that the grand jury, or at least there is some speculation that the grand jury in the Michael Brown case may not indict Officer Darren Wilson.
Yes, there is some speculation that might happen, and people are preparing for the worst, including like the Ferguson Florissant School District. Like I said, it's this tinderbox, this fear of what's going to happen. Are we going to see a repeat of what happened in August if this man, if nothing happens to this officer? I have no idea what's going to happen.
But it certainly does not seem that the lack of an indictment will be received well. And so there must be among law enforcement and the community at large a sense of bracing for some real tension.
Yes, there are people on Twitter I've seen like tweeting photos. They've seen police, like the armored vehicles, like people are tweeting photos that maybe they're possibly stocking up on all of these vehicles, preparing for the worst. And then the Ferguson Florissant School District are, making all these preparations in case the children can get home from school safely, rerouting bus routes. So everybody is on edge and preparing for what's going to happen. But the general mood is, there's a great possibility that this officer can get off, will not be charged.
Is there a sense among the protesters and in the St. Louis metropolitan area that this is an historic moment in terms of civil rights?
Definitely. St. Louis has a history of being a racially divided city, and the events that have occurred in Ferguson and surrounding the fatal shooting of Michael Brown has brought all of these issues to the surface, and has forced people to address these issues, and it has caused some great rifts between people, and I've seen people really I've seen it divide people, okay, and it's wow.
Any idea when the grand jury will return with a decision?
People are only speculating at this point.
Okay.
No one has really any idea of when that's going to occur.
That was Brigée O'Neill, a reporter with the St. Louis American. Now, the prosecuting attorney's office says it expects a decision from the grand jury in mid-November. A group of school superintendents is asking that the decision be released after school hours. They say they're concerned there will be violent protests if the grand jury does not indict Officer Darren Wilson. When the SSN Evening News returns, new details on that unmanned rocket that exploded just seconds after takeoff last night in Virginia.
This is SSN Evening News. This is SSN Evening News.
Topping our news digest tonight, an unmanned rocket carrying nearly 5,000 pounds of supplies for the International Space Station exploded seconds after takeoff in Virginia, and now NASA is asking questions. Tom Foreman reports.
And we have liftoff.
The first stage was just seconds into a 4-minute burn when the Antares rocket stalled, fell backward, and exploded. Nearly 750,000 pounds of thrust went haywire, and spectators across the bay say the blast shook the ground even there.
Immediately, probably about 5 seconds in, you just saw kind of a fireball, and it wasn't, you could tell immediately that something was wrong.
It also clearly shook Virginia-based Orbital Sciences, the private contractor that built the rocket under a nearly $2 billion contract with NASA, now needs answers.
The investigation will include evaluating the debris that we will find around the launch pad. If you find anything that washes ashore in the local area or came down on your farm, definitely do not touch it.
No one was hurt in the explosion, but gone in a flash, 1,600 pounds of science experiments on everything from meteors to human blood flow, more than 1,600 pounds of hardware, computers, spacewalk equipment, and 1,400 pounds of food for the ISS crew. That does not create an instant emergency, but it will put extra pressure on upcoming missions to reestablish the supply chain to those astronauts in orbit. And the explosion could create political pressure, too, in the continuing debate over how much space travel can or should be put into the hands of private companies.
The nurse who demanded she be taken out of quarantine in New Jersey says she will not obey orders to isolate herself at home in Maine. Even though Casey Hickox has no symptoms of the Ebola virus, health officials want her to stay at home for the remainder of a 21-day quarantine. Her attorney says she will not comply because she poses no risk. Hickox returned to the U.S. Friday after treating Ebola patients in West Africa. New developments tonight in Washington in the fight against Ebola. The Defense Department is moving forward with mandatory quarantines for all troops serving in West Africa. Polo Sandoval reports the new guidelines differ from those used for volunteer healthcare workers.
Military officials are headed to the drawing board. They're tasked with coming up with a quarantine strategy for U.S. troops coming home from West Africa, the men and women on the front lines of the Ebola battle.
The fact is, the military will have more Americans in Liberia than any other department.
The White House maintains, unlike U.S. troops, volunteers should not be quarantined upon their return home.
If we're discouraging our healthcare workers who are prepared to make these sacrifices from traveling to these places in need, then we're not doing our job in terms of looking after our own public health and safety.
President Obama explains that discrepancy by saying he sent the service members to the region. Healthcare workers often go as volunteers. 1,000 U.S. troops are already on the ground, a number that could grow to 4,000. All of them would be subjected to the 21-day quarantine.
This is also a policy that was discussed in great detail by the communities, by the families of our military men and women, and they very much wanted a safety valve on this.
The troop isolation wouldn't be the first. Army Major General Darrell Williams and 10 other soldiers are in the middle of a 21-day quarantine in Italy. Williams and his men can only contact family online for now. They say it's worth it as the fight against the silent enemy rages on. Reporting in Washington, I'm Polo Sandoval.
The Big Bang, evolution, Pope Francis credits God with both. The Pope expressed those ideas at the Vatican during a recent address about the evolving concepts of nature. Sounds like a departure from the typical Christian stance of God as the creator, but U.S. Catholic teaching has accepted evolution as part of God's creation process for more than a half-century. The Pope's remarks realign the Church's ideas with the notion that there is no conflict between evolution and Catholic doctrine. It's been 2 years since Hurricane Sandy slammed into the Northeast. Sandy killed at least 117 people in the United States. 69 more died in Canada and in the Caribbean. Superstorm Sandy did $50 billion in damages. The only storm that cost more was Hurricane Katrina, causing $108 billion. The family of a special needs girl is suing a school district in Alabama, alleging she was used as bait to catch an alleged sexual predator. That story next on the SSN Evening News.
You're watching SSN Evening News. You're watching SSN Evening News.
A 14-year-old girl in Alabama was allegedly used as bait to catch an accused sexual predator. Investigators say a teacher told the girl to go into the bathroom with the boy in order to catch him in the act. The girl says no one came to her rescue and that the boy raped her. It's been 5 years since the alleged incident, and the girl's family is now suing because they say there have not been any repercussions for school administrators who knew about the plan. Victor Blackwell picks up the story.
I just felt like I was set up by the teachers.
We'll call her Jaden. It's not her real name, but for the first time, she's telling her story publicly.
They gave me a word that they couldn't keep.
Sparkman Middle School near Huntsville, Alabama, January 22, 2010. Jaden was just 14 years old, and a 16-year-old 8th grader was propositioning her in the hallway again.
What would this boy say to you?
He would just always ask if I wanted to have sex with him and things like that.
And what did you say?
I usually just ignored him.
Jaden says a friend suggested she tell a teacher's aide, June Ann Simpson. Simpson knew of other girls the boy had tried to lure into the bathroom for sex, so Jaden says she told Simpson. However, when Simpson alerted the school's principal, Ronnie Blair, he told her it had to be proven that he was guilty of something before he could be punished, according to court documents. So Simpson hatched a plan. In this written statement, Simpson explains how she wants to catch the boy using Jaden as bait. She writes, "I was tired of that kid and that she should go pretend she wanted to meet him so we could set him up to catch him."
And when she first asked you to do that, what did you tell her?
I told her no. I didn't want to do it.
What changed your mind then?
Because I just wanted it to stop.
So the plan went forward. Simpson says she told Vice Principal Jean Dunaway about the plan, but Dunaway said nothing. Jaden says she was there too, but Dunaway denies that conversation ever happened. Jaden says she left the vice principal's office minutes later.
Did you see him in the hallway?
Mm-hmm.
And what did you say to him?
I said we can do it.
Simpson watched school surveillance cameras, hoping to catch them walk into the bathroom, but she never did. Why? Well, according to Jaden, the boy made a last-minute change. He told me to go into the boys' bathroom by the gym, she writes, and then told me never mind because everyone was around. The two went into a different bathroom. Simpson was watching surveillance cameras on the wrong hallway.
I thought they were going to do what they said they were going to do and be there and stop them and just get them in trouble.
Jaden says she stalled, told him, "I don't want to do this," and she tried blocking him, but she says it wasn't enough.
And no one came?
No.
Jaden says the boys sodomized her. Simpson watched surveillance like this given to CNN by Jaden's attorneys and waited for several minutes until students told her Jaden was not where she thought, that she'd gone into another bathroom. Simpson then sent a teacher to get them. They were found in a stall together.
I told them what happened and they called the cops and my foster parent.
According to the boys' written statement, they started kissing, and that is it. Jaden, however, said from the start she had been assaulted. And although it was the aide's plan to bring the students together, the administrators, shockingly, said they were not convinced Jaden was actually raped. And when they were deposed by Jaden's attorneys more than 2 years later, they were still unsure which student's story to believe. Principal Blair said, "I still, to this day, don't know for sure what happened in that bathroom, and that's the way I just have to leave it." Vice Principal Dunaway told them, "I believe she took responsibility for herself when she went into that bathroom." Jaden's attorney even showed another vice principal, Teresa Terrell, pictures of Jaden's anal trauma and asked if a 14-year-old would have consented to that kind of sexual behavior. Terrell replied, "I just don't know, one way or the other."
She didn't consent. She didn't consent.
This woman was Jaden's foster mom at the time.
When we send our children to school, we send them there with the trust that the teachers are going to protect them. But when you send your child there thinking that they're going to be okay and something like this happens, it really thwarts your trust for the school system.
Attorney Eric Artrip represents Jaden and her father. They filed a civil suit against the faculty and the school board claiming violations of state and federal laws, including sexual harassment provisions of Title IX.
If it had been followed, the allegations against this boy would have been properly investigated, and this result would have never happened.
In 2013, a federal court judge allowed claims of violation to state law, including negligence, but threw out federal claims against the faculty and school board. Appeals have been filed by all parties. Attorney Mark Boardman represents the Madison County School Board and school officials.
He found that the Board of Education's policies were proper. He found that school administrators took appropriate action and complied completely with federal law as soon as they were notified of this unfortunate incident.
And what happened to the boy? Well, he was not charged with a crime. Instead, court records show the school suspended him for 5 days for inappropriate touching a female in boys' bathroom, then sent him to an alternative school for a short time. But he eventually returned to Sparkman. It was at least the 13th sexual or violent incident in the boy's file, all in the space of 2 academic years.
What do you think?
He just gets away with it, I guess.
If you're wondering about the aide and the administrators, June Ann Simpson, the teacher's aide, her attorney says she was forced to resign, but the others have kept their positions with the school system. Ronnie Blair and Teresa Terrell, they're still principal and vice principal here at Sparkman. And then there's Jean Dunaway, the vice principal who allegedly knew about the plan before it was enacted. She's since been promoted. She's now principal at a nearby elementary school.
Jaden eventually dropped out of school, and at age 19, more than 4 years after the attack, she continues to struggle.
It's hard for me to have good days. I have days to where I just want to sit there by myself. I get angry faster, and I get insecure.
How will you get to those good days?
By actually having our day in court and letting everything be known so that it won't happen again.
That was Victor Blackwell reporting. Now, last month, the Departments of Justice and Education jointly submitted a brief in federal court explaining why the lower court's ruling on Title IX violations were wrong. The NCAA is reopening its investigation into the way the University of North Carolina handles athletics and academics. A report released last week found stunning examples of academic fraud at the university. NCAA President Mark Emmert recalled this report troubling. The report uncovered an African American studies class that existed only on paper and was taken by hundreds of athletes. An African American studies professor with whom we talked says he blames those in that department for the fraud at UNC and the damaging assumption made about black athletes.
What was really fascinating to me was this assumption that lies behind the whole thing, that these athletes can't make it academically. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's the beginning assumption that's going on here, is that young African-American athletes, because that's an awful lot of who these basketball players and football players were that got diverted into the African-American Studies program, that they can't make it in a regular academic course. If you look at the emails that are exchanged, that's always kind of that underlying thing. They encouraged them to take Swahili because they didn't think they could pass the Spanish classes. Now that makes no sense at all to me. I would think Swahili would be much more difficult than Spanish. In addition to the department, I think the other culprits in some ways, or in the whole thing, are the counseling service. Because they're the ones who guided the players into these programs. And again, the pressure on these counselors is immense. In fact, their pay, their future in the program involved them getting students passed through the university. If they didn't, they got fired. And so in a sense, there's all sorts of pressure working to corrupt the system to protect these millions of dollars of investment in these players.
One more note on that story, the students will most likely get to keep their degrees from UNC. Coming up on the SSN Evening News, the unique way a bar owner is documenting the artists who perform on his stage. So don't go away. Welcome back to the SSN Evening News. The owner of a small bar in Little Rock took a single photo of someone in the entryway of the bar, and it gave him an idea to document the history of an era in the bar. Tucked away in a quiet neighborhood in Little Rock, Arkansas, is a former railroad bar called Whitewater Tavern. You may have never heard of it, but it's home to musicians from all over the country who've played their songs on this stage night after night. The bar has been Whitewater Tavern for the past 37 years, and Matt White has been the co-owner for the last 8.
I book all the music here. We do shows at least 4 or 5 nights a week with bands from all over the country. So I book all the music, and I bartend here and just kind of help serve from the day-to-day responsibilities.
The stage is small, the seating area isn't large, and you won't find a television at each end of the bar. And that's because Matt says the focus here is music.
It almost feels like an old cabin in here, and the atmosphere and the vibe, it's an old railroad bar, you know, and places like this are disappearing every day. So it's definitely a unique experience to see live music here. And I think that's part of why touring musicians really appreciate it.
Besides his full-time job running a bar, Matt spends his free time taking photographs. About a year ago, he came up with an idea to combine the two, a project he calls Portraits in a Bar.
I've always really enjoyed taking photos, and about a year ago, I just happened to take a picture in the entrance to the bar here, and I really liked the way it looked, and it dawned on me that I should really be documenting all the musicians who play here and the many people who just hang out here.
Matt says the warm lighting and straightforward background really captured the vibe of the bar.
In the actual photos, I just frame it to where it's just 2 walls there, and it's kind of mysterious. A lot of people who've been coming here for a long time, they walk in, they're like, no, where do you take those photos? I'm like, as soon as you walk in, it's right there.
Right now, Matt has a collection of 110 photos of various artists, including Texas country singer and songwriter Billy Joe Shaver, jazz singer Walter Henderson, hip-hop artist Carl White from Greenville, Mississippi, singer Crystal Mercer, blues artist Lucius Spiller, and Alabama hip-hop group The Green Seed.
Each person is different, of course, but I generally like to get someone as soon as they're done performing and ask them to come over and ask them if I could take a photo of them. I like to include one of their instruments or something that is unique to them. And then some people, you know immediately from the first shot that you got something cool.
The candid shots are so expressive, capturing flirty eyes, sly grins, and everything in between. Matt says there's no planning involved, he just points and shoots, and so far, no one has turned him down.
If it's someone that I know or that I feel a little bit more comfortable with, I'll take the time to even bring a ladder in and to shoot from up above. Otherwise, it's just pretty quick shots right there and try to find something that works.
He plans to keep taking these portraits in a bar and eventually put them all together in a book.
I've been really, really grateful and as to how kind people have been. They seem really excited about them, and it's just a fun project that's ongoing.
Next on the SSN Evening News, find out how female fighters are playing a key role in the conflict between Kurdish fighters and ISIS militants.
This is SSN Evening News. This is SSN Evening News.
Women have played a key role in the conflict between Kurdish fighters and ISIS militants since the beginning. Female fighters have been on the front line in the battle against the radical Islamists. Ivan Watson has more.
Don't be fooled by the pretty song. These women are part of a militia that is ISIS's most deadly enemy in Syria. Kurdish fighters from the People's Protection Units, or YPG. They've fought ISIS on the ground in Syria for more than a year. Only recently, they started getting help from the U.S. in the form of airstrikes and weapons drops, a surprising turn of events for this secular, Marxist-rooted movement, which includes many fighters who have long battled America's NATO ally, Turkey. An important part of this Kurdish movement's ideology is founded on gender equality. That means female fighters fight and bleed on the front lines, and that stands in sharp contrast to ISIS, which has been covering women up and hiding them from public life. Addressing the crowd, a top Kurdish official who urges the fighters to protect their people from becoming slaves of ISIS. She is the co-president of one of 3 Kurdish statelets in northern Syria that have largely governed themselves for the last 3 years.
Our dream is to build a democratic society that includes Arabs, Christians, and Kurds, living together in unity.
The Kurds call their region Rojava. Some of them clearly proud of their experiment in self-rule. Life in the town of Derik looks relatively peaceful and secular, unlike other parts of Syria taken over by Islamist militias. But the streets here feel empty. Many of the town's Christian residents have fled, and more keep leaving. This is a sad day for your family. Why?
Yes, because they will go out from our country.
Peter Issa's tearful mother and sister wave goodbye from inside a 1954 DeSoto. Their final destination, Germany. The town's shrinking Christian flock can still walk peacefully through the streets to Sunday school, enjoying the protection of the Kurds. But the Kurds are paying dearly. At this memorial ceremony, mothers and wives of dead fighters and this widow. She says ISIS killed her husband last year and mutilated his body. If I didn't have these children, I myself would go and fight, she swears. Her young son already wears the uniform of a future Kurdish fighter. Ivan Watson, CNN, Rojava in northern Syria.
In sharp contrast, a hidden camera gives us a first-hand look at what one woman went through while walking down the streets of New York City. In 10 hours on the streets, she was on the receiving end of 108 cat calls. Her experience was filmed and edited into a public service announcement for anti-street harassment. The video has gone viral, and it has sparked a heated discussion about unsolicited comments directed at women on the streets. So we want to know what you think about this video. So go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/SouloftheSouthTelevision, and tell us if street harassment is an issue in your community.
You're watching
today. Wow. That's not good. Wow. What's up, beautiful? Have a good day. Hey, what's up, girl? How you doing? Somebody's acknowledging you. Hey, beautiful. Hey, baby. Hey, beautiful. How are you this morning? Have a nice evening.
God bless. Sexy American Eagle.
Hello, good morning. God bless you. Have a good day, all right? How you doing? Doing good? Hey, look at that. $5,000. You want to talk? We can't be friends or nothing. You don't speak. If I give you my number, you can talk to me? No? Too ugly? What's up, man? How you doing? Have a nice evening, dog.
And again, that experience was edited into a public service announcement for the anti-street harassment group known as Hollaback. So we want to know, what do you think about the video you just saw? Please go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Soul of the South Television. Tell us what you think and tell us if street harassment is an issue in your community. Coming up, a little prevention can go a long way when it comes to avoiding a dog bite. We have some ways to keep you safe. That's when our evening news continues.
You're watching SSN Evening News. You're watching SSN Evening News.
Dogs and kids, for generations, they've grown up together, but it is not always a happy relationship. So tonight, some ways to keep your furry friend happy and calm.
According to the ASPCA, half of all kids will be bitten by a dog before they turn 12. Now, not all dog bites are severe, some are just nips. But nearly 800,000 people require medical attention because of a dog bite each year. Animal trainer and behaviorist Victoria Stillwell teaches kids and their parents the right way to interact with dogs.
Children, naturally gregarious, they are loud, they have their body movements and their arms and run around and high-pitched voices, and this could all really elicit a negative reaction from your dog.
When children meet a friendly dog for the first time, teach them to offer an outstretched fist for the dog to sniff before you pet him. And always pet dogs under the chin. Patting a dog on the top of the head could be seen as a sign of aggression.
If you stare at that dog, that could be seen by the dog as a threat. If you smile at that dog, you're showing your teeth. That could be seen as a threat.
Other tips to prevent dog bites: never allow a child to put their face near a dog's face. Never lunge at a dog or back her into a corner. And look for signs that the dog is uncomfortable: a tense body, an erect or slowly wagging tail, or yawning and licking their lips. For today's Health Minute, I'm Holly Furfer.
AT&T is in legal trouble with its unlimited data plan. The Federal Trade Commission is suing, alleging the wireless carrier misled customers into thinking they had unlimited data to use and then slowed down their connection speeds if they used too much. The FTC says the practice known as throttling affected 3.5 million customers. AT&T denies the allegations, says it has always been transparent with customers about its data use policies. No need to be jealous of the person who has the window seat, because the airplanes of the future could be windowless. A company in the UK developed this concept. The plane's windows are replaced with floor-to-ceiling high-def screens, and they display panoramic views that are captured by cameras mounted outside the plane. If you don't like the view, all you have to do is change it by choosing from a menu of pre-recorded images. The screens can also be used for entertainment like watching movies, surfing the internet, or ordering in-flight services. The company believes the idea could be a reality in about 10 years. Some of Washington's deepest legends and a look at looming figures who may have never left. All of that when the SSN Evening News returns. We're glad you're with us tonight. With the midterm elections just right around the corner, most politicians are focused on the future, but some of Washington's deepest legends and lore involve the political past and some looming figures who may have never left. The White House and the U.S. Capitol are at the heart of dozens of ghost stories. Karen Kafa finds out where some of them started.
During election season, the focus is the nation's future. But some of the most told stories in Washington come from the past, or maybe the present, depending upon how one looks at it.
Particularly the ones that are about people whose lives have been sort of absorbed in the passion.
Politicians who can't seem to let go of their seats, or maybe it's the town that can't let go of them. The halls of government and the president's home have their share of ghost stories. White House Historical Association Chief Historian William Bashong says the more prominent the president, the more prominent in ghost lore, like Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, he's the rock star of all ghosts at the White House, no question about it.
including one story from the wife of an eventual successor.
First Lady Grace Coolidge thought she saw him in the Yellow Oval Room looking out over the Potomac contemplatively in the 1920s.
First ladies didn't just tell stories, some have their own stories.
Abigail Adams, who famously hung the president's laundry in the East Room because it was unfinished when the Adams moved into the house. And supposedly a number of witnesses have said that they have smelled the scent of lavender.
One of the most popular anecdotes on Capitol Hill also surrounds a former president. John Quincy Adams served 17 years in the House after being commander-in-chief, but still left unfinished business.
And he had a stroke on the House floor and was carried off into the Speaker's office and died there. People really missed him.
He's perhaps having late-night chats with a lesser-known name who may still well be preoccupied.
There's a famous Senator, Boyce Penrose, who was the last one to try to read every bill. And he was a bachelor and would spend evenings in the Capitol reading, and he had a rocking chair. And so people said later that they could hear that rocking chair still going on.
Most of the stories are about 19th century figures, likely relayed before technology turned the news cycle nonstop.
Newspaper writers, reporters who came to the White House, so it had a slow beat and needed a story, so they came up with, talked to the staff and came up with some stories and recorded them in the newspapers.
All these years later, still part of the town's history. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
The military involvement of African Americans started during the earliest days when America was just a handful of colonies, and that involvement continues to the present day. There's not been a war fought by or within the United States in which African Americans did not participate. Every soldier is brave, courageous, and dedicated, but their names and their deeds aren't always known. And with Veterans Day on November 11th, we want to salute those who defend our nation. So we invite you to post a photo, upload a video, and include a story about the soul of a warrior, your favorite warrior, so that we can honor them. You can go to our Facebook page, or you can send us a tweet at Soul_South, or go to our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/SouloftheSouthTV. You can send in your photos and your videos until November 10th, and we hope you will. Look at the top stories of the day when the SSN Evening News returns.
This is SSN Evening News. This is SSN Evening News.
Take a look at this. How incredible is this? Okay, it's just a layup. That's all right there. A Tennessee college student won $10,000 for making 4 baskets in a row, made a layup, then a free throw, which you just saw. Now for the three-pointer. Okay, very good. We're on a roll here. And look at this. Are you ready for this? It's pretty incredible. Half court, all 4 shots in under 30 seconds. Now, he already has his tuition paid for his senior year, and he says he's going to hand out 10,000 $1 bills. All 4 of those shots in 30 seconds. He wins $10,000, and he's going to give all of it away. How generous is that? Recapping our top news stories of the day, the Ferguson, Missouri Police Chief, Tom Jackson, is denying reports that he's resigning. Jackson says no one has asked him to step down, and if he does resign, it will be his own choice. NASA is now investigating that rocket explosion in Wallops Island, Virginia. They will look at the debris around the launch pad to determine what happened. And in our nation's capital, the Defense Department is moving forward with mandatory quarantines for all troops serving in West Africa. Those are the top stories for today, and that's it for SSN Evening News. We hope to see you here tomorrow night. I'm Vicki Newton. Good night.